Welcome to the Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. My name is Dr. Adriana Popescu. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and leader in the field of mental health, energy psychology, addiction, trauma, and empowerment. In this podcast, we will be exploring mental health from a variety of perspectives, from the spiritual to the shamanic and beyond. What if mental illness isn't everything we think it is? What if everything we see as a pathology is actually a possibility? What else is possible with mental health?
Hi, everyone. Dr. Adriana Popescu here with you today with another episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. And I'm very excited to have as my guest today, Michelle Farris. She is a psychotherapist, codependency expert, and anger management specialist in right where I am, nearby, San Jose, California. She's been featured in several online publications and podcasts, known for her down-to-earth approach and deep expertise. Michelle empowers her clients to stop people pleasing, trust themselves again, and build the healthy, connected relationships they've always wanted. Through her online courses and digital resources, she teaches practical tools for codependency recovery, emotional regulation, self-trust, and lasting relationship success. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we always start off the podcast by getting to know our guest a little bit. So we'd love to hear more about you, your story,
Sure.
how you came to be doing this work.
So I always knew I wanted to be a therapist. And even at 11 years old, I actually asked my mom to go to therapy and she said yes. Don't ask me at 11 years old how I knew to ask, but I did. And I just had that experience of being in the room, being safe. And I was always a kid that wanted to figure things out emotionally. So fast forward when I was leaving to college, I realized that I had no skills. Like I went to San Diego State for 2 years and I didn't make one friend. And it was really a shock that the fantasy of as soon as I leave my dysfunctional home, everything will be fine. That didn't happen. And I realized that I had a lot of work to do. So I got into therapy, I got into 12-step recovery. And that's honestly why I do the work I do, because I look back on my own, because I looked at my codependency recovery and it took me so long to make progress because there were these gaps. And I didn't know what they were because in the late 80s, 90s, you just did what you did. And now I realize, oh my God, the process could have been so much easier had I done a few things differently. But, that's how we learn. But that's, to me, what drives me doing this work.
Mm-hmm. So let's start with a super basic question, because I think a lot of people might not even have a clear understanding of what exactly codependency is.
Yeah. So you're right, because there's several definitions out there. But for me, it's an over functioning in relationships where you are sacrificing yourself in the process. We people please, we give, we volunteer, we do all these things for other people, hoping to get the love and approval that we can't give ourselves. So we're very other focused, which of course means that we're not going to trust ourselves and we're not going to have a really good sense of self, which is why we develop that unhealthy dependency on other people.
So do you think the origins of this, we therapists talk a lot about attachment theory and disordered attachment and things like that. Is
Mm-hmm.
that kind of what we're talking? I mean, are the origins in something like
Oh,
that?
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And I think you could probably speak to that probably more than I do, but I definitely agree. Our earliest relationships and connections and lack of connections really set us up to develop, unhealthy patterns. Because if our parents aren't emotionally or physically available, or they're abusive or neglectful, we're going to find some way to get that attention. And often, especially with women, we learn to take care of others so that we get at least some acknowledgement or praise, but then it becomes a dysfunctional part of our personality.
Do you think that codependency tends to happen more for women than men?
I do, but I definitely think that there's an underreported amount of men that are codependent. I'm sure you see probably in your own work. I'm going to save them. I'm going to pay for everything, hoping that they're going to appreciate me. I'm never going to say no. It's interesting. Men, when they do it, it looks very similar. They want to be the hero just like we do.
Yeah. I would think also, I work a lot with limiting beliefs, and you
Hmm.
kind of reference this, but it does sound like, also at the core of this pattern of behavior is some sort of limiting belief about oneself, right? Like
Hmm.
you're not feeling very good about yourself, and you're looking outside of yourself to get that validation, that approval. You
Right.
think that if they accept me, if they love me, then I'm okay. Right?
Yeah. Well, and what's ironic is anyone who's ever done that knows that it lasts about 5 minutes. And then you're on to the next thing because, when you think about it, a healthy childhood has to be self focused. We have to literally focus on, what do I think? What do I want? What do I want to play with? What are my skills? How can I develop into a human being? And when we don't do that, and we can't do that because it's too threatening in our home, and we become so other focused that that's the only way we can adapt to any social situation. And that's really dangerous because you're not allowed to have that time to be a kid and to really focus on, what is it that I want to be when I grow up versus what do I have to be in this family in order to survive.
Right. And so I think we hear a lot about codependency in
Hmm.
families, and certainly in like romantic type relationships, which we'll
Yeah.
get to. But you also work a lot with codependency in friendships. And I feel like that's one that often doesn't get spoken about as much.
Yeah. Well, I think women tend to have more intense connections with each other. And if you have any semblance of codependency, that attachment to your friend can become overwhelming. I know for me, I did this several times in my recovery, but about 7 years ago, I had a friendship suddenly end. And I thought I was doing like great. I thought it was a healthy friendship. And what I realized looking back was one of the first warning signs that I ignored was she said, I don't really like that much contact. And we were talking like 3 or 4 times a week. And she was calling me because in my recovery, I gauge that because if I'm doing all the calling, that's a red flag. And so it really made me realize, oh my gosh, like even in our recovery, we can still get too dependent on that other person. And I know one of my clients just sent me an email and said that they started a new friendship and this person immediately globbed on and immediately started texting her every morning and wanting to talk, wanting that constant connection. And she was overwhelmed. And I'm like, yeah, that is what a codependent friendship is one person needs the other, just like a romantic relationship.
Yeah. Now, do you often find that kind of imbalance where one person is kind of the more clingy, maybe needy person and the
Mhm.
other one less so? Or can you have two people who are equally dependent and needy of each other?
I think it's possible. I don't see that much. I see the pattern I see more is the codependent person and the person who tends to be more narcissistic or the person who's much more self-centered and you want to take care of me? Great. Here's what you can do for me. And then the whole relationship gets set up to give to them and then the other person realizes, "Hey, you know what? I don't have to do much."
Yeah. And I think too, here's another part that I notice people don't often talk about, which is kind
Yeah.
of the shadow side, what I would call the shadow side
Mhm.
of codependency, which is when the person we would call, I guess, the codependent, the clinging, like
Mhm.
needing, like I'm making my whole world about this other person. When that's not reciprocated, or they're not validated or acknowledged for it, oftentimes they become very angry and controlling,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Yeah, they can be angry and controlling, or they can be angry and resentful. So the people pleaser is going to say, I'm never going to tell you that I'm angry, but I'm going to leak it out in indirect guilt trips or comments or, oh, I can't see you today or whatever. But yeah, there is that part of the codependent that isn't as common, that is more outwardly controlling, outwardly, I'm going to tell you exactly what you're supposed to do in your life because I have all the answers. But that's a different flavor than the people pleaser. So I find that that's a really good point you're making, that there are two camps to me in codependency that tend to show up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting, like how nuanced it can be. And here's another piece I think we need to bring in. We talk a lot about codependency with addiction, right? And we talk, I mean, certainly as an addiction specialist, it just seems like codependency goes hand in hand with it. Can you speak to that a little bit? What's that dynamic about?
Oh, for sure. Because if, a lot of people growing up in codependent behaviors have some level of addiction in their family. So they're used to caretaking, enabling, and then they end up attracting those same qualities, thinking that I have the best guy. If only he would stop smoking pot, we would be fine. And then we think we have their answer because let's face it, a lot of people who are codependent are really good at fixing things. So it's not like we don't have that gift, but we don't have that gift for other people as much as we think we do. So there really is a connection of, can I fix this other person so that I feel safe? And that potential with addiction or mental illness or rage can really be intoxicating because it's so familiar to our family of origin patterns.
Well, and that's such an important thing you just said, because I think also that's what the kids are doing. I mean, I have a very clear, as an only child, with parents who had a highly conflictual relationship and eventually went through a very messy divorce. I was triangulated, into their dynamic. And I remember feeling like I needed to make them happy. I needed to try to make peace. I needed to do whatever I could, um and I remember even being told, when my mom told me they were getting divorced, I remember thinking, what did I do wrong? Because I thought it was my fault. And then how do I fix it? Right? The fixing thing. How do I make mom, dad happy? How do I make our family stay together? Like all these things from a really young age, actually.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. Well, and imagine what it would have been like if one of your parents had sat you down and said, "This is not your job. You're the kid. This has nothing to do with you." It's like, that's what I want to hear. I want people to hear is, even when we make mistakes like that, if we are in our current, role as parent, we can always go back and acknowledge it. And to me, that's the gift that we can give our kids now, is to say, you know what? It's not okay that I made you take care of your siblings. You need to have your own life. And I realize that. So to me, there's so much potential for healing, even when we're struggling with these behaviors, by just acknowledging them to our kids.
Yeah, because when you become that parentified child,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Especially, yeah, in an addicted family where maybe one of the parents is addicted to something, and then you kind of take the role of parent. Um,
Hmm.
you don't end up getting much of a childhood. You don't
No.
really learn play and fun. And I see this trait with some codependent folks where they don't really know how to let go and have fun because they're
Hmm.
always so concerned with, is everything okay, and
Right.
is like everything handled, and do we know where we're
Hmm.
going next, and do we have the directions? You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, totally. I just did a video on why strong women over 50 are impacted by codependency and they hit their wall. Because by then we've done so much caregiving, and we're usually taking care of our parents or beginning to at that stage. We've already raised our kids and we're fried. And then people wonder, well, why is she so bitchy? And it's like, well, it's not happening in a vacuum. Like there are 20, 30, 40 years of over functioning that a woman does, that suddenly I think in midlife we can hit a wall.
what is that? What does that look like?
Well, I think that's when our family and friends start noticing that we're more irritable. We are more in the I don't care category. We don't want to be doing what we've always done, but we're still doing it. So we're leaking out in passive aggressive comments, guilt trips, not because we're mean or bad people, but because we are literally full and we can't manage it. And you pair this with menopause and those hormonal changes, and this can explode. And I think a lot of people don't really give it the due that it needs to realize that, women, this is kind of the women's midlife crisis, is they hit that wall of giving and they're like, I'm out.
I've also seen, again, kind of working in the addiction field, I've also seen where that can happen, where you kind of get the empty nest syndrome,
Yes.
and now there's like no one else to take care of,
Right.
right? Like,
Right.
and they're left with this sort of empty feeling, almost like a spiritual sort of emptiness inside, because my
Hmm.
meaning and purpose for living has just gone to college. What do I do now?
Right. Well, and sometimes if you're not doing this work, you're going to find another people project. Like somebody to rescue, somebody to fix. I mean, and that's what creates, the cycle, but that's honestly the best time to consider getting into recovery. Like start Al-Anon, check out Coda, go to a therapist, like start looking at why you can't sit still, why you always need to be doing something, because that's not going to give you the happiness that you think it will. And I think by 50, a lot of women are realizing that. They realize that, okay, I have bent over backwards for my family and friends, and what have I gotten? Not much. So they're already halfway there, but you bring up a really good point. It is a time, that empty nesting period, where, you can reassess your life and actually do something about it.
Right. So let's talk about that. So I mean, first, I think the first obviously step towards anything is recognizing there's an issue. So how does someone know, especially as someone who maybe is listening right now and thinking, that might be me, but I'm not sure. How does someone find out if they are in fact codependent?
So the easiest bar I usually set is, if you can give without resentment, it's not codependent. Like if I can give to you and go, I'm good. I'm good. Doesn't hurt me, doesn't make me hate you, doesn't make me want to avoid you. I'm good. But if I'm giving to you and then secretly going, God, I don't want to do this anymore. I am so sick of this. This person never gives back to me. That's a real sign that you are over functioning. That little resentment that creeps in, because that can be such a running theme when there's codependency, that people don't often realize, because they think, well, there's no evidence to support it. I should be helpful, so I should say yes, versus, well, wait a minute, what if it's okay that you actually don't want to say yes? And there's probably years of history that is contributing to that. It's not just that you don't want to help somebody in the moment, right? But we get super judgy with ourselves and think, well, I have to keep doing what I've always done because that's what people know about who I am and how I contribute. But then you end up paying the price for that.
Well, yeah, because their value is tied to it. My value as a human being is in what I do for others, right? Yeah, I've noticed with some clients that they don't recognize, especially some of the ladies you're talking about, like they don't recognize these qualities. They think they are being helpful. They think, well, of course, this is what I'm supposed to do as a parent, as a friend, as a whatever. This is caring. This is what caring is. And so I've sometimes referred clients, to the Coda website or other. You can find all these quizzes, online. Like, am I codependent? That's a good place to start. Is just like look, like read up on it. Like, do you resonate with this? Answer these questions. Do you find yourself saying yes a lot to
Right.
these things?
Right. Are you avoiding conflict? Do you feel like you can never be honest about what you really think and feel because somebody else is going to have a difference of opinion? Do you never set boundaries? I mean, yeah. Or do you attract people with a lot of problems? I mean, that's a huge one.
That's a big one. Yeah.
I mean, people don't realize that who they attract is often a reflection of who we are,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly, and your history, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's say someone now has discovered, okay, I think I might be codependent. Well, okay, now what? Like, what does
Yeah.
healing from that? What does recovery from that look like?
So there's three parts. To me, the first is getting the focus off of other people onto yourself and actually cultivating a relationship with yourself, because that's the missing piece I didn't do. If I had been willing to do that one piece, I would have made way more progress in my recovery early on. But I didn't think that was sexy. I wanted another relationship. I wanted another friend. So I kept going until I bottomed out, which, that's kind of the path of recovery anyway. So don't beat yourself up if you're doing that. The second part is learning really good relationship skills like boundaries, like communication without blame, taking care of yourself in a relationship, not over functioning. And then the third piece is, doing that family of origin work where you're looking at how your childhood has set you up to be codependent and working through that trauma so that you can start to feel like you're becoming more of an adult. And that takes a long time. That's not an easy process, but that's really what recovery looks like. And you can get a ton of relief in the first two stages, even if you're not ready to do the childhood work yet.
I think that part of what also has to happen for folks is to learn how to regulate their emotions, their nervous systems, right? Because we're talking about potentially, in these kinds of dynamics, a dysregulated nervous system. Maybe there's trauma. All that also came, from growing up. So you've got people, like that, what you call that, like restlessness, that anxiety, that's a stress response. That's the fight, flight, freeze mechanism, right? So what
Absolutely.
about that piece when it comes to recovery?
So that piece I would put in the first one, yourself, because it's self-care, self-trust, self-esteem, right? And part of that is how do you manage your emotions? And part of what the codependent will do is avoid their emotions at all costs because they're just trying to live another day and please and get the love and approval. But that's where, at some point you're not going to be able to do that anymore. So the first part of the emotional regulation is to literally just notice when someone asks you for a favor, what is your body telling you? That's the easiest way to start. Because when somebody used to say, "Oh, Michelle, can you help me do this?" I'd be like, and that was my no. That dread, or I'd get a stomach ache, or my throat would tighten because I didn't want to speak. Like, if you just literally listen to your body when people are asking for things, you're gonna know, like, you know what? Yeah, I really don't want to do this, because a yes is a heck yeah, right? It's sure, I'll help you. I've no, and you have nothing going on in the body. You're totally clean. But when it's a hesitation, when it's confusion, when it's, oh, I don't know, that I don't know is really a no. And that's the first step, to start recognizing when it's a no and when those feelings of irritability, of stress, of why is this person asking me for the millionth time, right? To help. Like, all that stuff is part of it, because the other part of emotional regulation that I talk about a lot in my anger class is it's not just the feeling you have in the moment, it's all the accumulative stress that you're living on or from, that is the backdrop, right? It's just that undercurrent where if I'm living at a 6 out of 10 on the stress scale, it's not going to take me much to explode.
Well, no, and if you keep repressing and repressing, I often use the analogy, like if you just keep putting stuff in a closet and you keep stuffing it, eventually the door's going to bust open and everything's going to come out. That's kind of what I think codependent people do with their emotions. They repress, like this isn't about me, this is about them, and then it bubbles up and, like, volcanic eruptions can occur, in the form of anger, blow-ups, whatever. Or what I again see a lot is a lot of people start using drugs, alcohol, food,
Yep. Or food. Yep.
some other type of shopping, whatever it is, some other type of addictive behavior to keep those emotions pushed down, and maybe even to continue to keep giving, like I need these stimulants so I can keep giving, 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 doing.
Right. And really, what they need to do is to honor whatever feeling shows up without judging it. Because most codependents are going to say, "Oh, I shouldn't feel that way. I'm being too sensitive." That's wrong. This doesn't make any sense. Versus, you know what? That's your starting point, is to say, you know what? I feel this way. I don't know why. Maybe it doesn't make sense, but I'm going to trust it, because
I
that's the
Yeah.
start.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's also really interesting that CODA, for example, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Codependence Anonymous. It falls under this 12-step philosophy, which was really oriented toward addiction
Mhm.
originally, right? So, is there some aspect you see of codependency that has an addictive kind of quality to it?
Oh, for sure. I think there's a relationship addiction component where we just can't be alone. So we constantly seek out people almost like band-aids. And they're going to make me feel better. And if one person leaves, I'm going to run and get somebody else because being in your own skin feels intolerable because there's so much pain, there's so much resentment, there's so much childhood stuff that we can't manage. So we just think if we just get somebody new, we'll be okay.
And that probably does to some degree, it does function even physiologically, right? Like the Band-Aid that like calms the nervous system down, like "Ugh, all this anxiety alone by myself. Oh, I have that friend now. Oh, okay. My nervous system can relax, which is really, kind of a twisted. Yes, we want to create safety, of course, and healthy relationships, safe relationships are a way to heal from trauma. But this isn't exactly that.
Yeah, and that's why I often recommend in early recovery, like start spending some time alone. Like even if it's just 10 minutes. No music, not being on the phone, not doing laundry, like literally just can you just be with yourself even though it's uncomfortable and start to build from that because that's what I had to do and that was the best thing I ever did.
I think it also is about creating a healthy balance between that alone time and being okay with yourself, but also being around other people, and in healthier ways with also healthy boundaries. Like, I don't need to be glued to this person 24/7. And I feel like sometimes the group healing process is can be really helpful here. Now we're talking maybe like workshops, 12-step programs, support groups. We do group therapy where I work at the rehab. These types of things also seem really important.
Oh, yeah. I don't whenever I have a client that struggles with codependency, one of the first things I tell them is ideally, you're going to want group support and individual because 1 hour a week is not enough. It's just not. But like in my early recovery, I went to 4 to 5 meetings a week. I mean, I needed a place to go to share about my day, to share about my pain, to listen to other people, to connect, to not have to pretend everything was okay. And when people realize how much support is available, then usually they can click into it. But, there's just a lot of hesitation out there about, I'm not a group person, this, it's a cult. I mean, I've heard it all. And it's like, you know what? You don't have to believe in God to be in a 12-step program. You can absolutely say, no, I'm an atheist or agnostic, and nobody should tell you what to do. And if they do, just ignore them because that's not what we do in 12-step programs. We let people figure it out and take what they like and leave the rest.
Yeah, I always tell people when it comes to those types of things, like, give it a chance. Just one meeting, one time is not necessarily representative of how it all is. Like, try different meetings, different locations, different times. Maybe a women's only or men's only meeting. Like, there's so much variability, right? Just even within that one type of support group. So give it a chance. And nowadays, I think what's really cool, and I've definitely seen an improvement in attendance since we have online meetings, right? Because so many people have that social anxiety. I don't want to be in a strange place with strange people, but online, I feel safe. I don't even have to turn my camera on. That's a great way to get started.
Oh, yeah. There's really no excuse anymore for not checking it out because you don't have to even leave your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I do want to explore this for a moment. Codependency in the therapeutic relationship, right? What I like about what we were just talking about with groups and then time alone, and yes, also, a healthy, safe relationship, maybe with a therapist, but like not having, I have seen this where like everything becomes about that relationship, and now you've got the clients like texting you or trying to call you in between sessions and sending you emails that are like, this long, or even the therapist can become codependent. So can we talk about that dynamic?
Oh, definitely. Over the years, I've had to set some boundaries around emails, like, let's keep this in session. But For me, I notice I have to be mindful that I don't have their answer either. Like I can explore, what about, give them some ideas, but that's where I can get hooked is thinking like, oh, because when we're seeing it, even if you're not a therapist, when you're listening to someone talk about their issues and you're not connected to them in any way, it's easier to find the solution for them because you're once removed. But I think that's the tricky part in codependency therapy is you really want to help them explore what they want. And sometimes, yeah, there is going to have to be talk about boundaries and we need to keep it in session. And, that's one of the reasons if a client presents really needy in the beginning, like she's going to glob onto me or I immediately suggest Al-Anon because, I want them to divvy up their emotional eggs so they're not just to me because that's not going to help them any.
Well, and that's such a role model for healthy relationships, individual relationships as well, right? Because like what you talked about earlier, the codependent friendship, where if you're on the receiving end of that, it feels smothering, right? So, yeah, getting your support from multiple places and sources, not making one person the source, and then eventually, I think, yeah, in the healing process, learning how to make yourself the source for your own validation and stuff, and not continuing to look externally for that.
Yeah. And, honestly, I think in the beginning, it's really okay to transfer that dependency to the group because it needs to go somewhere. And as long as you don't put it to one person, maybe you do get dependent on meetings for a while. That's okay. I mean, imagine, I don't think people realize what it feels like to be that supported. Where you have a bad day and you immediately can go in a meeting and talk about it and share and have nobody give you advice, nobody tell you what to do, but just that there's a space for you. And I think if more people realized the value after experiencing it, I think more people, I think 12-step programs would just be huge, bigger than they already are.
I agree. I do want to touch upon this because you also do a lot of this work as well, what we might call anger management, learning how to deal with anger in healthier ways. And it does seem like there's quite a bit of overlap between, as we talked about, between codependency and dysregulated emotions, anger in particular, resentments. How does that all interface in your work?
So when there's codependency, they're almost always stuffing their emotions. And it takes a while for them to recognize that, oh my God, I'm angry. And usually they have to have an outburst to really get it. But once they do, they realize, holy cow, I'm angry about a lot of things. So, the first thing that usually I talk about is the difference between healthy and unhealthy anger. Because some anger can actually be healthy. Like when you think about it, when you're angry, it's usually someone has said or done something, or something has happened in your environment that's not okay with you. That's a natural reaction to get angry over that. Like, whoa, somebody just stepped on my toe, or somebody just called me a name, or whatever it is. It's like that emotion is actually your guidepost that you can listen to. But the other part with healthy anger is it has to be about us. Like, I need to let you know I'm upset by what just happened, versus unhealthy anger is about me blaming you. You made me feel this way. You're the reason I feel like crap. You're the reason I'm unhappy. Like, whenever it's the blame game, and that's honestly the most common anger we see in the world is the blame game. Of course, that's going to feel much more powerless, much more divisive, and really intense, because when I'm focusing on what someone's done to me, I'm totally powerless and I am really mad because I can do nothing. But if I can say, wait a minute, this is my reaction, then I feel more in control of it.
Right. Well, that's why I like, in 12 step, they talk about my side of the street and your side of the street, and I'm only responsible for what's on my side of the street. I think that's so important. People really, we really, I don't know where we get this, probably from a very young age, but like not understanding that I am responsible for my own emotions. Other people do not make me anything, right? I let them. I might give my power away. I might allow them to affect me, but ultimately I have control over my own emotions and responses.
Right. And it doesn't mean that they're off the hook for what they said or did, right? It's like they still have a part. It's just how we see it. Because if I see it as, oh my God, they're doing this to me and I have no say, then I'm going to go down the drain versus, wait a minute, if I actually bring it up and say, hey, this hurt, I have a chance to possibly deepen the relationship and repair it.
Yeah, I think that the first part is like a victim kind of consciousness, right? And then the latter is an empowered consciousness, and I think we do that a lot in working with our clients, is really help them empower them to know they do have that power.
Yeah. And I think the first step is literally letting them see that their anger is valid. Because the first thing I say in my class is if you're angry, there's a valid reason behind it. It's not just because, they've been labeled the hothead, they've been labeled this or that. And it's like, no, there's always a reason. And if we can start to validate, like, you know what, I don't know why I feel this way, but I feel this way and it's okay. That's your start. Because then you go to what do I do to take care of myself? And that's the piece where, when you're dealing with emotional regulation and intense triggers, you don't want to go to the person that you're in the conflict with. You want to remove yourself and practice some form of self soothing so that you can get that anger level down so you can take care of yourself. And most people think, oh no, I just need my partner to validate me and then I'll feel okay. But if you're in an argument, that's most likely not going to happen.
That's the thing that's I mean, it makes no logical sense. We can see it from the outside looking in. It's like, no, people want to resolve it right here, right now, in this moment when we're angry and agitated and it's your fault. And like, here's a scorecard of all the other things you've ever done. Nobody's getting resolution in that moment. You have to take the time out. You have to self-soothe. You have to get back on top of your own emotions. And then you can have a calmer, hopefully, conversation about what has happened and how do where do we
Yeah.
go from here? Yeah.
Well, and you made a good point. Bringing everything in, but the kitchen sink is going to escalate it versus, okay, I'm going to share one thing. I'm going to share one thing that bothers me and see how far I get because that's going to be much more manageable for you and the other person versus I'm just going to unleash 20 years of resentment because I can't hold it in anymore.
And probably seeing some really awful things in the process, right? And it can be hard for people to heal from that when they've heard some of those horrific things, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
So as we kind of wind it down here, I'm curious, aside from like outside support groups, therapy, are there other resources you recommend for folks who are identifying with this idea of possibly being codependent or having anger issues? Where else could they go? And I want to hear about your stuff, but are there any other like books or websites or videos or things you would recommend for folks?
Well, I think Codependent No More is, the Bible of codependency. The other thing that I read recently that I really thought had a lot to do with codependency, even though the word isn't mentioned, is the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. That is such an easy read. So I can see why that book exploded because it really is common sense of what happens when we can't let go, when we can't accept reality, when we overdo. So that's a really nice resource. There's lots of videos and courses. I mean, I have a course. I do a 4-week program on anger and codependency. But that's what I would definitely recommend is find more stuff. Like, yes, you want to do the 12 step. Yes, you want a therapist that understands codependency, but the Codependent No More. I know Facing Codependence by Melanie Beattie is an old book, but that's a great book. The Let Them Theory. I don't know if there's podcasts directly for codependent, but I'm sure there is. But, the more you can listen and connect and make those understandings, the better.
Yeah. Yeah, and to hear other perspectives, right? Because you're
Absolutely.
so entrenched in your way of seeing things that's why like groups and like other information coming in is so important to get you looking at things from a different perspective because then you can, oh, I can make a different choice here. You don't I don't think the codependent person, if so much of it is not conscious, you don't even realize that you're doing it until you learn, oh, this is what that is.
Right. Right. And there's a lot of good inherent in codependent behaviors. We are givers, we are helpers, and that's a lovely thing. We just need boundaries around it.
Exactly. And so if people want to find out more about you and your work, where do they go?
Mhm. So my website is counselingrecovery.com. I have some free guides on codependency that are going to literally walk you through the signs, what detachment looks like, what starting boundaries looks like. Because I think the more specific you can start, I mean, yes, you can read and do all that stuff, but sometimes that writing is so powerful in the beginning to really hone in on, okay, what are my codependency issues and how can I actually start to heal that? Uh, I have a YouTube channel, Relationships at Work with Michelle Farris. I have a ton on codependency there too. So those are pretty much the two places people can find me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I feel like this has been a very thorough and enlightening conversation.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
yeah. Any final thoughts for us?
Be gentle with yourself. If you are struggling, if this is starting to make sense and it's painful, you're in the right place. Keep listening to her podcast. You're on the right track. It does get better.
Mhm. Absolutely. Healing is possible. Anything is healable. That's my feeling. If you have the intention and the determination to make a change, you can make that change. So hear that, audience. And if you have found this podcast helpful, please do share it, like, comment, subscribe, pass it on to someone else, like whatever you need to do to get this information out in the world. It's so important. People are searching, um, and and we want them to find this info. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you next time on Kaleidoscope of Possibilities.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. This has been Dr. Adriana Popescu. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share with others. To find out more about me, my guests, and more, please visit my website at adrianapopescu.org. See you next time.